Do this in remembrance of me. A reflection for Maundy, Thursday, 2020. It was interesting to notice how early on in the process of developing a national response to the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic, voices started to emerge, encouraging us to think about how our actions in the face of the restrictions might be remembered in future. These included a mixture of the frivolous and the serious, from opinion pieces in the Church Times reminding us to attend to the spiritual consequences of isolation, to cartoons featuring toilet rolls, to one discussion I heard on the radio imagining how coronavirus might shape the novels of the future. Even in the early days, such thinking seemed to have an eye on the long term, and perhaps even more so now as the situation continues with no easily definable endpoint. We're not just being encouraged to think about how we will want to remember this episode amongst ourselves this time next year or a couple of years away. There's widespread recognition that this is an episode of much longer significance, something that will be talked about, reflected on, and analysed for decades and potentially for generations to come. In lots of ways, this is not surprising. The whole thing has happened at great speed, and in that pivotal fortnight when drastic new measures were being announced very rapidly, advice issued one day was literally void the next. People should try to work from home, but schools would stay open. Schools would close to all but the children of key workers. Churches would be open for private prayer but not for public worship. Then churches must close to everyone. Even by the standards of our adrenaline-hungry Western culture, the pace of so much necessary adaptation took us by surprise and left us feeling rather breathless. It's only natural that we should react to that by looking forward to something a bit more concrete, to a time when we might have an opportunity to reflect and to wonder, what will we have learned from it all? And what might the people coming after us think of what we did? This exercise is more than just navel-gazing while we're scrabbling around for entertainment or diversion. In our communication-rich and superficially judgmental society, there's a keen sense that our actions now matter for our legacy. We're at a point that feels like no other, where we might actually shape things, not just sit back and let them happen to us, leaving it all to the government. The challenge, of course, is that doing less, not more, is actually the most responsible and community-minded thing we can do. Not going out protects ourselves and others, and it's something we can and should all cooperate with, but not at the expense of loneliness. Keeping in touch with each other is just as vital for our own and our community's health as infection control. There's much we can and must do for ourselves and neighbours from within our isolation, especially as it continues. So how might you want this time to be remembered? A time when community networks flourished, people found new ways to look out for each other and became more aware of the vulnerable in their neighbourhoods. A time when we reassessed our suspicion of experts and learnt to put our trust once again in those who dedicate themselves and apply their learning to suggest solutions to scientific and strategic problems. A turning of the tide in politics, when respect for different perspectives was prioritised over point scoring, and politicians committed to working together for the common good. A time when parents renewed their respect for teachers working hard to educate their children all day, every day. A time when NHS workers, the emergency services and vital service providers of all sorts were cheered loudly and gratefully every week on doorsteps across the land. A time that helped us to embrace the other, to get alongside those who are different from us, rather than fear them, because a virus doesn't discriminate on grounds of race, colour, gender, wealth, social status, or any other measure we might seek to apply. You may or may not agree with this list, and will surely have other items of your own, but looking to these outcomes feels like a long way off just at the moment, if I'm honest. For now, we're still left with things we can't do. And for liturgically minded Christians on Maundy Thursday, that feels like quite a lot. Commemoration, remembering with a purpose, is a very significant part of our ritual in church throughout the year, but it's especially so today. The readings for the principal service on Thursday of Holy Week make this point very strongly. In Exodus chapter 12, we hear God's instructions to Moses and Aaron for how the Israelites were to prepare for the Passover, that life-saving ritual that protected God's chosen people from the final plague and delivered them safely into exile. From the moment of its successful execution onwards, commemoration of Passover became and remains an important cornerstone of Jewish worship. Remembering with a purpose and giving thanks. In his first letter to the Corinthians, Paul sets out what he understands to be at the heart of the act of communion, namely, that it recalls Christ's command to remember him in the ritual enactment of the Last Supper, and what this means for us now and in the future. Finally, in the Gospel reading from John, we are brought face to face with Jesus' sacrificial love as the servant king kneels down and washes his disciples' feet, taking their breath away as he disrupts their expectations yet again. In normal circumstances, we would gather this evening to honour Paul's instruction and share in the Eucharist together, like we do most Sundays, but somehow, against the background of these readings, on Maundy Thursday it feels very different. We're somehow more conscious of doing this in remembrance of him who will be crucified tomorrow, when we will stand by with the baying crowd. We might normally also have our feet washed in a tender and humbling reenactment of the gospel story of Jesus washing his disciples' feet. Then we might sit and contemplate as the church is stripped down before our eyes, and all the adornments that beautify our worship the rest of the year are put away. An act that helps us, in the words of Stephen Cottrell, experience what it is to be church without church. Circumstances have effectively enacted this last ritual for us, albeit without any time to prepare. But what about the other two? Taking communion and having our feet washed. Since we've been unable to worship in church, I've found myself thinking more and more about why that feels uncomfortable. What is it that I'm missing, that I can't get from praying the same words at home? After all, God is everywhere all of the time, isn't he? One of the things that's helped is the Church of England's advice on spiritual communion. The short act of worship that's suggested to accompany this reflection uses material that the Church recommends as a way to call to mind the grace by which someone not able to participate in a celebration of the Eucharist nonetheless shares in the communion of Jesus Christ. We hope that it will also help you as we stand on the threshold of the most profound and sombre days of Good Friday and Holy Saturday. Something else that I've benefited from hugely in recent days is trying to remember times when I've shared communion with others in a way that has for some reason seemed particularly significant. As it happens, the two occasions that come most prominently to mind were both ecumenical in a very profound way. Instances when, for human reasons, sharing bread and wine together was in some way complicated, and in one case, not even possible literally. But, by the grace of God, both occasions turned out in fact to be moments of real connection and encounter. As I recall those times, I discover that they still feed me. I feel God's presence with me as I remembered them, and somehow I know through that act of remembering that He is patient and faithful, and longs to meet us once more in the Eucharist when we are able to gather together again, as we surely will. As you sit and take part in spiritual communion this evening, can you think of a time when receiving communion in person felt particularly special, and why? Rest in that memory, treasure it, and thank God for all that it continues to offer you. Keep alive in your heart the knowledge that we are still the body of Christ, even in our social isolation, for we follow the one who is the bread of life. And when you next wash your feet, before you go to bed tonight or in the morning, try bringing today's passage from John chapter 13 to mind. Can you imagine that Jesus is with you as you perform this ritual? How might doing this help you to receive Christ once again and be his disciple?